Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, January 29th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the Michigan sign stealing scandal. That is back in the news here. In this segment, we turn our attention to the NBA. The NBA power rankings are here every single Wednesday, and we're going to go over them 30-1. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. Excuse me. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, January 28th. But like I was saying, the NBA power rankings are here, and as we do every week, we're going to go over them 30-1. And there are 5 tiers of teams in the NBA, I think, that we so labeled. We're going to start off with the very bottom tier, the tank tier, the teams that are tanking for Cooper Flag, trying to get that top pick in the NBA draft to get the guy that can change their franchise. And there's just a couple teams in this tier, 4 of them to be exact. And at number 30, it's the Washington Wizards. No doubt about it, right? The Washington Wizards, by far the worst team in the NBA. They're fighting with some historically bad teams of all time. They're doing slightly better than the worst teams of all time, but they've now lost 14 straight games. They've had 2 losing streaks this season of at least 14 games, and that is awful, right? They're not losing games by a lot right now, but with the trade deadline coming around the corner, maybe they can sell off some of their assets, some of their guys like a Kyle Kuzma, who's been playing fine as of late. Maybe a Jordan Poole can be traded away. I'm curious how much more depleted this team can get, but they're not worse than the Pistons were last year, and that is a bar that they are ahead of. At number 29, still in that tank tier, it's the Pelicans. This team had a lot of expectations. We saw them go pretty far last season, had a pretty good playoff game from Zion Williamson in a play-in round against the Lakers. He goes down, and really that's been the theme of this team. Injuries. They get Zion Williamson back recently, and he's done everything they need him to do offensively, but defensively, this team has completely fallen off a cliff. They had some of the top defenders in the league last year. A couple of them get injured, and this team's defense just falls apart. The Pelicans have been a disaster all season long. They're 4-22 against teams with sub-500 records, and that is awful. That is not good. That's why they're down here at number 29. That's why they're here in the tank tier. If they can stay healthy, they're a team that I think could be dangerous in the West, but especially in a very deep Western Conference. They're going to need a little bit more than just staying healthy. They're going to need another pretty big pick to elevate themselves to the level where they want to be at with Zion Williamson. At number 28, we have the Utah Jazz. This team, similar to the Wizards, is just awful. There's not a lot of positives there. They're in this tank tier. They don't have a lot of those young guys that are really stepping up this season. They've got a couple guys that they're trying to develop, a couple guys that look like solid pieces, but at the end of the day, they're still a real number 1 star away from doing anything close to anything. They've got a lot of draft picks. They made a couple trades, trading away Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. Those are going to start cashing soon. We will see what they can do with that, but for now, they're in that tanking tier. And the final team in that tanking tier, at number 27, we have the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets were doing a little bit better than this at the beginning of the year. They trade away Dennis Schroeder to the Golden State Warriors, and that was smart because their whole plan going into the season, they traded back for their own picks. They traded with the Rockets to get their picks back because they were planning on being bad. They trade away Mikal Bridges to the Knicks. They get a lot of picks there. They are trying their best to get a high draft pick, and they truly are attempting to tank. This is not a good lineup. They have some injuries, but again, this is kind of their goal, but still near the top of the tanking tier because they were surprisingly good to start the season off after a couple of guys had a pretty hot start to the year. Getting out of that tanking tier, we've got this what I've labeled as the disappointment tier. This follows teams 26 to number 19 on our NBA power rankings. This disappointment tier is because either injuries are ravaging this team, or they're not having their guys step up the way they expected to, or the season just overall is a little disappointing. Now, not everyone is going to fit into this nice, neat little bucket, but they're not really tanking. They've got a little bit of life. Maybe they're just maybe they're just a couple years away from getting anywhere in the NBA. But at number 26, we have the Hornets. They're here because of injuries in that disappointment tier, right? They lose Brandon Miller for the season pretty recently. He was having a pretty good year. LaMelo Ball goes down recently as well. He was doing amazing, getting a lot of votes in the All-Star. He's going to be an All-Star if he's healthy enough to play. The Hornets have a nice young little core, but injuries are making this team a little disappointing, and they're going to have to figure that out soon, try and keep their guys in-house, and maybe add another star next to Miller and LaMelo Ball. At 25, we have the Trailblazers. Also a little disappointing. Some of their young guys have played really well. Scoot Henderson's been playing really good. Danny Avdia, who they traded for from the Washington Wizards, when he's on the court, has been good, but injuries have ravaged this team a little bit. They didn't have a lot of expectations, and honestly, they're probably exceeding them by just a little bit, but still, this is in a disappointing tier where they're not really going to get anything done this season, but they're not really competing for that number 1 overall pick either. At number 24, we have the Raptors. This is a team that a lot of people thought were going to make a jump, right? They have Scotty Barnes, an all-star last season. He's just going to miss out this season, most likely. They've got a lot of players on there that played really well last season, but this year the defense has just fallen apart. And it's not like this team is that different. We thought they'd take that next step. Unfortunately, they are just unable to get there. Instead, they have some of the worst defense in all of the NBA, and they're just a really big disappointment. One of the bigger disappointments in the NBA this season. At number 23, we have the Chicago Bulls. Chicago Bulls, I don't know what they're going to do at the deadline because this is kind of a tier for sellers. But the Bulls have a history of not really doing it. They've got a couple pieces that I think teams would be interested, but I haven't heard a lot of buzz around this team. This team is kind of sitting near 500, maybe with a chance to do something if they make the play-in, but they're not going to win a title this year. They're not that type of talent. They're not that team with that type of talent. They're going to need to get a lot done, but they're not getting that top pick, and because of that, I think this is a disappointing Bulls season. At number 22, maybe the face of disappointment. It's the Philadelphia 76ers, whether it be because of injuries or because players not playing the way you want them to. Joel Embiid missing a lot of time, a promising rookie getting hurt in Jared McCain, Paul George continuing to be in and out of the lineups with injuries, Tyrese Maxey not being enough on his own with this team. This team has completely fallen to shambles, and they've been playing better as of late. And in a weak Eastern Conference, they can still make a run if they're able to turn it around, if Joel Embiid can get healthy, if he can stay healthy for a playoff run, maybe they can turn it around. But for now, this team is incredibly disappointing, and it just has not gone the way that they wanted it to at the beginning of the season when they brought in a big three to try and compete for an NBA title. At number 21, we have the Atlanta Hawks, also in this disappointment tier. Injuries completely ravage this team, right? Daniil Hunter, he goes down with a season-ending injury yesterday. That's just not going to cut it, right? This Hawks team has won a couple games against a couple of the top teams in the NBA, but they just haven't been consistent enough. They've fallen back below 500. Trae Young's been good. He's been solid, but he hasn't been enough, especially with the team losing a couple of key pieces due to injury recently. At number 20, we have the Spurs. Victor Wembanyama's been playing amazing, right? But it's not enough. This team isn't good enough with him and Chris Paul, the unaging wonder of Chris Paul. But outside of them, this team's just been okay, right? They've got a couple of promising rookies in there, and they're going to continue to grow with talent wanting to play with Victor Wembanyama. But for now, this Spurs season has not quite gone the way they want to, and they're still stuck firmly in that disappointment tier. And at number 19, rounding out that disappointment tier, it's the Warriors. The Warriors started off the season hot. They were one of the hottest teams in the NBA. They were competing for that one seed in the West, and then it all fell apart. injury hit this team and they weren't able to trot out that 11-man rotation anymore. Steph Curry is not a one-man show that can carry this team anymore, and the rest of the team just has not been up to snuff. They trade for Dennis Schroeder to try and get him help. He hasn't been enough. He's been fine, but he hasn't been enough, right? This is a Warriors team that is falling off and falling off hard. They're sitting around 500, and they're thinking about making a big move. I'm not sure if they have the capital to do that, but they're a team that reeks of desperation, and they are by far in that disappointment tier. Getting out of that disappointment tier, we just have the mid tier. This is teams 18 to 9 in our NBA power rankings, the biggest tier overall, but still, these teams are just kind of mid. They're not really going to vie for an NBA championship this year. They might make some noise in the playoffs. They might even upset a team or two. But for now, these teams are just kind of middling. At number 18, we have the Pistons. And middling is a huge step up for that Detroit Pistons team. Believe me. This Detroit Pistons team would have done anything to be mid last year. They're at 500 right now. That is huge. Huge for this Pistons team. Cade Cunningham has been playing pretty well recently, probably going to find his way to an all-star nod. And this is a team that, while it hasn't been the best, has been leagues better than it was last year. And because of that, this season is an overwhelming success. They're still in that mid tier, but that is about 12 spots higher than they would have been last year at any point in the NBA power rankings. At number 17, we have the Suns. They could very easily be in that disappointment tier, but they're just kind of mid right now, right? You have a team led by a lot of stars. Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker. These guys that are on big contracts, and they're trying to make moves. Their defense hasn't really been great, as always. They're still struggling with depth. They're trying to maybe make another big move, go after Jimmy Butler. They made some trades to potentially make that happen. That's going to be something to watch with them, but right now, they're struggling in that mid-tier. At 16, we have the Orlando Magic. Injuries have killed this team, but still they found a way to be okay, right? They've lost their three best players for at least portions of the season. This is a team that, if they're healthy, I think is very easily a top 10 team in the NBA, and I think this team could surprise a lot of people next year when they find their way back to health. And number 15, getting into the top half of the NBA, still in that mid-tier, though, it's the Miami Heat. The big thing with the Miami Heat this season is Jimmy Butler, right? What's going to go on with him? Is he even going to get traded? They're not going to trade him for nothing. They're not going to cut him. They're not going to trade him for a bag of bones. Someone needs to bring something up. He's suspended indefinitely. His third suspension of the season with the Miami Heat. He's not playing. They're not going to have him play. I don't know how this situation ends, but it doesn't seem there hasn't been a lot of buzz as far as trades going with Jimmy Butler, and they're kind of reaching a deadline. Just 8 days left until the trade deadline, and we're really starting to run out of time for Jimmy Butler to find a new home. But this team has found a couple guys that they can build around, right? Another rookie has stepped up for them. Surprise, surprise. He's find a way to do that every single time, right? Tyler Hero has played really good football. Tyler Hero has been, really good basketball. Tyler Hero has been amazing for them this year. Bam Adebayo has been great, and this is a team that's going to find their way in the playoffs, and they're probably going to lose in the first or second round. They're very firmly in that middle tier of the NBA. At number 14, we have the Mavericks. This is a team that made the NBA Finals last year, but they've lost a lot of guys. Derek Lively went down. They lost Kyrie Irving for a little bit. Luka went down for a little bit, right? This is a team that has injuries on top of injuries on top of injuries. They're still good, but they're in that mid-tier because of these injuries. At 13, we have the Kings. They fought back from being one of the worst teams in the NBA, firing their coach, and now one of their stars potentially is on the trade market. Doesn't sound like he's coming back after this season when he's going to be a free agent, so maybe they try and get something for him. The Kings are looking for probably a solid package, probably close to what they got for a guy like Tyrese Halliburton when they traded him a couple years ago. But I don't know if they're really going to get that. De'Aaron Fox is good, but he has preferred destinations, and all reports are that he's preferring the Spurs. I don't know if the Spurs are really going to make a big trade this season when they can just get him in the offseason next year, but that might be a risk to take. We will see. At number 12, we have the Los Angeles Lakers. Losing Anthony Davis because he's been amazing this year. He's been a guy that I think he's been the best player on that team, right? He's been dominant, 25 points, 2 blocks. He does it on both ends. He's been really, really good. And I think Anthony Davis going down, it's not supposed to be a serious injury, but still, they're in that middle tier. LeBron James is 40 years old. He's doing his thing. This is a team that's going to beat up on the bad teams, but it's going to struggle with the good ones. I don't think they're going to make a big move, but we'll see, because maybe without Anthony Davis, the front office will feel pressured to do something with the last couple years of LeBron. At 11, we have the Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards is amazing. Anthony Edwards is so good at basketball, but the rest of that team is just not keeping up with him. Dante DiVincenzo goes down for a while, which sucks. That trade clearly has not worked out with them, with Cat having a really good time being an all-star starter over there for the New York Knicks right now. Right now, the Timberwolves, they're just outside the top 10, but they're still in that mid-tier. The thing with the NBA is there is a very steep drop-off between the contenders and the pretenders, and right now the Timberwolves just aren't really a title contender this year. At number 10, we have the Pacers. In the top 10, we're still in the mid-tier, right? Tyrese Halliburton is a guy that's not very consistent, and the Pacers can go out there and they can drop 150 points on you in any given night, but they can also shoot 10% from the field and score 80 points, right? They are very Jekyll and Hyde, this team is, and they just need to be more consistent. Until they can get that consistency up, they're going to be in that mid-tier for a long time. And at number 9, the final team in that mid-tier, it's the Clippers. The Los Angeles Clippers have had a season that I did not think. They're the team that I'm the most surprised by being good. I thought they would be near the bottom of the league. I hated their offseason. Every move they've made has worked out amazing. Kawhi Leonard is back and he's playing basketball again. I didn't think he would play this season after the way that they described his injury at the beginning. I'm shocked this Clippers team is doing so well, but they're not real title contenders. They're not guys that I think, they're not a team that I think can really put together a title run and win. They're just a part of that mid-tier for now. But that rounds that out. Getting into the top 8, this is where we get to contenders. I've got the contender tier here from number 8 to number 5. And these are teams that I think can win a title this year. They're not going to be top tier contenders, but they're guys that I think could win a title if enough things bounce their way. At number 8, we've got the Bucks. The Bucks come in there, and Giannis has been amazing, right? They've been able to play a little bit better defense. Damian Lillard puts up his offense, and Giannis does his thing. This is a Bucks team that if they get the right path in the playoffs, if they get enough breaks with injury, they might be able to find a way to contending, but they're on that bottom tier of it. At number 7, we have the Nuggets. They're in that contending tier simply because, like the Bucks, they have one of the best players in the world on their squad. They have Nikola Jokic on their squad, and Nikola Jokic is amazing. But when he's not on the squad, it just doesn't work out. And I can't trust that Nuggets team. He can't be out there for 48 minutes, which sucks for them. But they're probably not going to win a title this year. They're still in that contending tier, though. At number 6, we have the Grizzlies. I love this Grizzlies team, but they just don't have enough oomph, right? They have a lot of great players. They've got Ja Morant, who's a true number 1 over there, right? They've got some great defending. They've got some great defenders, guys that have won Defensive Player of the Years in the past. Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr., right? These are really, really good players. You have a lot of great offensive weapons. This is a dangerous team, but I just don't think they have enough of that top tier talent to compete with the best in the West. At number 5, we have the Rockets. They're young, and they've got a lot of talent. They've got talent oozing out of everywhere on this roster, up and down the starting lineup, up and down the bench. This team is amazing. But again, they're young, and I just don't think they have that true number 1 guy yet. Because of that, they're not in that top-tier contenders. But if enough things bounce their way, if those young guys step up, if that defense continues to be as good as it was in the beginning of the season, this team could find their way to potentially a title. And getting into the top 4, this is where we get to these top-tier contenders. At number 4, I've got the New York Knicks. They're out here in the East. It's a little bit easier, but in the top tier of it, it's just not going to be the easiest thing for them, right? The Knicks are a team that that's run by Tibbs, and that's not necessarily a great thing for longevity and long playoff runs because you're wearing out these guys. They're playing game in, game out. They're playing 45, 50 minutes a game, right? In a 48-minute game, they're playing all 48 minutes. It's just not good for the health of these guys, and we see it take wear and tear on some of these guys' bodies, and right now it's fine. They've got the guys to do it, but I'm just a little worried as the season goes on. Injuries might catch up to this team, but for now, they're a top-tier contender. At number 3, we have the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics, they're just a super team. Coming off of winning a title last year, they brought back and even improved on their roster. They haven't been as dominant as they were last year. There have been a couple teams that have been a little more dominant than them, but they've still been amazing this season. At number 2, the Cavs. 1, 2, and 3 in the East go 2, 3, 4 in our power rankings here. The Cavs got on a bit of a schneid, lost 3 straight games. Not something they're used to doing, but they got back on their high horse. They figured out a way to win basketball games, and they're a dominant team. Kenny Atkinson has done a great job with this squad, and they continue to be dominant across the basketball court. And then at number 1, it's the Thunder. There's no other team that's as good as the Thunder are, offensively, defensively, an MVP, most likely, as long as things continue going the way they are, in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. This team is amazing. They're the best in the West by a mile, and it really isn't even that close. The Thunder are the best team in basketball. You could make an argument for maybe the Celtics or the Cavs, but right now, the Thunder, by far, best team in the NBA. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to the WNBA. Free agency has been going wild over there. 2 major trades, a 3-team trade that saw 2 former first overall picks being swapped, and a 2-time MVP finding a new home, as well as another all-star level player being traded across the league. We'll talk about that and much more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.